Welcome back to Tech Spy, episode 001, and we're starting with one that matters. In the next 12 minutes, where Opus 4.6 left us, the 5 things 4.7 actually changed. My take on what Anthropic just signaled, how 4.7 holds up against GPT-5 and Gemini 3, and what you should do about it today. Sources at the end. Let's get into it. Past thinking type enabled, budget tokens 8,000, to Opus 4.7 and you get a 400. That parameter is gone. Not deprecated, not warned, just gone. The replacement is automatic, thinking type adaptive, and Claude decides for itself how long to reason. Anthropic just took away your knob. Whether that's right is the question we're spending the next 12 minutes on. Let's start with where 4.6 left us. When Opus 4.6 shipped, adaptive thinking was already there. The model could decide its own reasoning budget based on task complexity. But budget tokens still worked as a manual override. You could cap it for cheap requests, inflate it for hard ones, or pin it to a fixed number for reproducibility. So 4.6 carried both paradigms at once: managed model and manual control coexisting. That coexistence is over. 4.7 picked a side. The teams who relied on budget tokens are now in migration territory. The teams who already trusted adaptive get nothing to do. Anthropic's bet? More of you trust the model than you'd admit. Time to find out. Now let's deep dive into what 4.7 actually changed. 5 things changed. Here's each one, what breaks if you skip it, and what to do instead. First, thinking mode. On Opus 4.7, thinking type enabled with budget tokens N returns a 400. The parameter is gone from the API entirely. 2 options remain: adaptive, the recommended path, or disabled. With adaptive, the model allocates its own reasoning based on task complexity. With disabled, extended thinking is off. There's no third option where you pin the count yourself. Second, a new effort tier. Anthropic added XHI between high and max. It's the recommended setting for coding and agentic work on 4.7, and it's what Claude Code itself defaults to. Migration risk. 4.7's effort-to-cost curves aren't the same as 4.6's. If you carry your old effort setting unchanged from 4.6, you're either overspending or leaving quality on the table. Retune. Third, thinking content is omitted by default. Thinking blocks still arrive in the stream on 4.7, but their text is empty unless you opt in. To surface the model's reasoning, pass thinking type adaptive with display summarized. This one doesn't throw an error. It silently drops content. If you stream reasoning to users or log it for debugging, your existing handlers will appear to work while giving you nothing. Fourth, task budgets, a new beta feature. Pass output config with task budget type tokens and total N, with the beta header task budgets 2026-03-13. The model sees a running countdown across the full agentic loop and self-moderates to stay inside it. Distinct from max tokens, that's an enforced ceiling the model isn't aware of. Task budgets are advisory, but the model respects them. Fifth, sampling parameters are gone. Temperature, top P, top K, all return 400 on 4.7. Adaptive thinking handles variability internally. You don't get to dial it. Mechanical fix, grep for those params and remove them. Here's where we get to my take. Here's what Anthropic actually did with 4.7. They removed the knobs you use to compensate for model uncertainty. Budget tokens wasn't just a budget tool. For a lot of teams, it was a proxy for trust. If you didn't trust the model to allocate its own reasoning, you capped it. If you'd been burned by adaptive going long on simple prompts, you pinned it. The parameter let teams keep one foot in the manual control world, while the rest of the API moved toward managed quality. That foot is now off the platform. 4.7 says, trust the metacontroller or use a different model. There's no middle path. I think this is right, and ungentle. It's right because the metacontroller really is better at this than you are. Adaptive thinking on 4.6 already outperformed manually tuned budgets on most workloads. Anthropic's own eval showed it, and the teams I've talked to who actually measured it confirmed it. The cases where manual capping helped were narrow. Cost-sensitive batch jobs and reproducibility required eval harnesses. Both have other answers. It's ungentle because removing a parameter people relied on, without a deprecation warning, without a transition period, kills muscle memory. The migration is mechanical, but the trust shift isn't. You used to get a foot gun but also tool. Now you get neither. The shy tier matters more than people are saying. It's not a marketing notch between high and max. It's the new default for agentic coding work. Claude Code itself ships with J. That's not a coincidence. Anthropic has internal data on what makes coding agents good and where the cost curve bends. Shag is what they picked for their own product. If you're running your own agent stack, Shag is the new starting point unless you measured something else. Task budgets are the quiet headline. A model that sees its own remaining budget and self-paces is a different kind of system than one that just gets cut off at max tokens. Loops can plan. They can summarize their own context, drop optional steps, or wrap up early if the budget's tight. This is the early version of what agentic infrastructure looks like, agents that economize themselves. Cost is unchanged at $5 per million input and $25 per million output. Same context window, 1 million tokens. So the upgrade decision isn't a money question, it's a quality versus migration cost question. The release is the philosophy, managed quality over manual control. The footguns are gone and so are the tools. The bet is that the model's good enough now that you don't need either. Now let's stack 4.7 up against the field. Start with Sonnet 4.6. For single-shot tasks, one prompt, one response, no tool calls. The gap between Opus 4.7 and Sonnet 4.6 is narrow. Sonnet costs less. For most of those cases, the quality difference won't justify the Opus premium. Where 4.7 separates, multi-step coding, long agentic loops with tool orchestration, and tasks where the depth of adaptive thinking actually buys you something. If your workload has any of those characteristics, 4.7 wins. If it doesn't, Sonnet wins on cost. Versus GPT-5. The comparison depends on what you're doing. For pure long context retrieval, feeding 800,000 tokens of code and asking questions, both hold up. For tool orchestration with structured outputs and prompt cache reuse, 4.7's tool use stability is more consistent in testing. GPT-5's edge is in the multimodal stack. Vision tasks where you need careful frame-level analysis are where it pulls ahead. If you're not doing vision, 4.7 is the safer pick. Versus Gemini 3, this is the hardest call. Gemini 3 has a wider context, 2 million tokens, and its prompt caching is solid. But Anthropic's interleaved thinking is something Gemini doesn't replicate. When you need the model to think, output partial work, get tool results back, then keep thinking. The round-trip-aware reasoning is an Anthropic-specific pattern. 4.7, with X-high effort, holds in those workflows. Gemini's strengths are different territory, massive context windows where the recall pattern matters more than reasoning depth. No overall winner here. Tasks that loop and reason and tool use repeatedly. 4.7, tasks that retrieve once and answer once. Sonnet 4.6 or Gemini 3, depending on context size. Tasks that include images. GPT-5, if vision is central. 4.7, if it's incidental. The era of one model winning everything ended a year ago. Pick by axes that matter for your work. So what should you do today? 3 paths. Migrate now if you depend on adaptive thinking with extended reasoning, or your agentic stack benefits from X-high effort. The breaking changes are mechanical. Greep for budget tokens, replace with adaptive. Greep for temperature, top P, top K, and API calls. And remove them. Time investment, a few hours. Wait if you're on 4.6 with budget tokens working fine and your effort tuned for your cost curves. There's no quality cliff between 4.6 and 4.7 for non-agentic workloads, and Anthropic kept budget tokens working on 4.6 as a transitional escape hatch. You have time to retune. Stay on 4.6 if you have hard token budget requirements you can't get away from. The 4.6 carve-out keeps that path open. Doesn't apply to 4.7. Budget tokens is fully removed there. And here's where the receipts live. All 7 sources cited in this episode are on screen now. Anthropic's release notes for 4.7, the migration guide for breaking changes, the extended thinking and adaptive thinking docs, the effort levels reference, the task budget's beta documentation, the 4.x model card, and the pricing page. Subscribe for the next episode. We're benchmarking agentic loop costs across effort tiers on 4.7. That's Opus 4.7. If this saved you a meeting or sharpened a migration decision, share it with someone running Claude in production. We're back next week, benchmarking agentic loop costs across effort tiers on real workloads. Until then,